The icy wind howled across the barren wasteland of Kala 7, tearing through the ragged armor of Captain Elias Rourke and his reconnaissance squad. The planet stretched before them like a frozen graveyard, jagged shards of ice jutting from the ground and mist curling low across the terrain. Silence had been their first enemy. An unnatural stillness that made every footstep feel loud, every breath a drumbeat against their nerves. Elias's eyes scanned the horizon, searching for the telltale signs of movement. Something was coming, he could feel it in his bones. Without warning, a shriek split the air. Aliens! Tall, sinewy, with limbs that bent in impossible ways, erupted from the ice fog. Their eyes glowed with a cold intelligence, and jagged teeth gleamed in the pale light. The squad opened fire, plasma rifles spitting blue-white beams, but the creatures moved with eerie precision. Elias dodged a swipe from a clawed hand, feeling the force knock him off balance. He landed heavily on the ice, the air knocked from his lungs. Pain stabbed his side as he realized the alien swipe had caught him. Around him, the squad scattered, firing blindly as the pack descended. He tried to call a tactical retreat, but his comms crackled under the strain. One by one, his squad members were either knocked down or forced to flee, swallowed by the fog. Elias gritted his teeth and struggled to rise, every movement agony. The battle was losing its rhythm, slipping from their control. Then, through the haze, he saw them cubs. Not alien, not fully human, but something in between. Young, human ally hybrids trained for survival and stealth. They crouched behind ice spires, eyes glinting with intelligence far beyond their apparent age. Elias recognized their potential immediately. These were the silent guardians he had been warned about, but never seen in action. One cub, barely taller than a child, stepped slightly forward, its eyes fixed on the fallen captain. "They have no idea who we're dealing with," it whispered. A sound almost lost in the screaming wind, but heavy with meaning. There was no fear in the tone, only determination. It was a spark, a flicker of life in the middle of chaos, and Elias felt a surge of hope. The other cubs began moving, shadows among shadows, using the terrain to their advantage. They struck with swift, precise attacks, tripping an alien with a thrown device, cutting tendons with a flash blade, disappearing before the creatures could react. Elias watched, amazed as the young hybrids began turning the tide of a battle that seemed already lost. The aliens faltered, confusion flashing in their predatory eyes. Pain blurred his vision, but Elias forced himself to focus. The cubs were more than allies, they were a revelation. He had trained humans for decades, fought every imaginable enemy, and yet nothing had prepared him for this. He realized that the whispers, the stealth, the courage of these cubs would define not just this battle, but the fate of humans in this sector. Elias struggled to rise, clutching his side, the fog of consciousness threatening to drag him under. The cubs, tiny yet unyielding, prepared to strike again. The fight had just begun, but the first spark of retaliation had ignited, and the aliens would soon learn that humans, no matter how small, could bite back. The wind bit at their faces, carrying the metallic tang of blood and the acrid smoke of energy blasts. Elias Rourke struggled to stay on his feet, every breath a painful reminder that he had been nearly mortally wounded. Around him, the icy battlefield was littered with fallen aliens and debris from their failed ambush. Yet it was not despair that filled him, it was awe. The cubs, small and deceptively fragile, moved like predators honed by instinct and intelligence, striking with precision that no human squad could match. From behind a jagged ice spire, the smallest cub crouched low, eyes scanning for movement.
A pair of alien scouts, separated from the main pack, were circling toward their wounded captain, intent on finishing what they had started. Without hesitation, the cub leapt. Its movements were a blur, faster than human eyes could track. A flash blade arced in a shimmering curve, severing a tendon in one scout's leg, sending it crashing into the ice. The other alien spun to strike, only to find itself ensnared in a trap of sharp, retractable wires, expertly laid across the frozen ground. Elias, leaning heavily on a fractured knee, barked orders through the comms, his voice hoarse but commanding. "Cubs, flank left, draw them toward the ridge." They responded instantly, disappearing into the shadows like wraiths, only to emerge in perfect synchrony on the alien's blind side. Each cub was a master of stealth and cunning, turning what should have been a massacre into a deadly chess match. The aliens began to realize their mistake. They were, yes, fast, but they were predictable, and the cubs were not. Every ambush, every trap, every feint was executed with intelligence and fearlessness. They struck in silence, vanished in a blink, and reappeared where least expected. One cub used a thermal decoy to lure a group of aliens into a frozen crevice, while another hurled a compact explosive that sent an entire squad tumbling into the ice below. Elias gritted his teeth against the pain, adrenaline overriding fatigue. The cubs weren't just surviving, they were teaching the aliens a lesson they would not forget. "They don't know us," he muttered under his breath, echoing the whisper he had heard earlier. And indeed, the aliens were beginning to understand just how deadly humans could be when underestimated. But the fight was far from over. The alien Alpha, a towering creature with segmented armor and claws that could crush bone, was approaching, drawn by the chaos. The cubs, undeterred, regrouped around Elias, forming a protective perimeter. Each movement was calculated, each strike synchronized, demonstrating that their bond went beyond mere training. It was instinct, intuition, and loyalty fused into a single, unstoppable force. The battlefield shifted with every second. Aliens that had once seemed invincible now fell to clever traps and lightning-fast strikes. Elias, despite his injuries, felt hope swelling inside him. This wasn't more than survival. This was the dawn of humanity asserting itself in a universe that had long underestimated it. The cubs' whisper, "They have no idea who we're dealing with," was no longer a warning. It was a promise. And as the sun dipped below the jagged horizon, casting long shadows across the ice, the cubs prepared for the next wave of the alien assault. The real battle was just beginning, and they were ready. The icy plains of Kalis 7 seemed to hold its breath as the alien Alpha emerged from the fog, its segmented armor glinting like a jagged crown of ice. Towering over the battlefield, it exuded raw power, each step cracking the frozen ground beneath it. Elias Rourke, leaning on his plasma rifle for support, gritted his teeth. Pain seared through his side with every breath, but he refused to fall. This fight was far from over. The cubs moved with the fluidity of shadows, flanking the Alpha from both sides. Each tiny warrior seemed impossibly fast, yet perfectly coordinated. One leapt onto a ridge, disappearing from sight before the Alpha could turn. Another darted across the ice, launching a grappling net that wrapped around the Alpha's limb. The creature roared, a sound that split the cold air like thunder, and slammed its massive claw down, only to find it meeting empty snow. The cubs were already gone, reappearing elsewhere with silent precision. Elias, leaning heavily on a fractured knee, barked orders through the comms, his voice hoarse but commanding. "Cubs, flank left, draw them toward the ridge." They responded instantly, disappearing into the shadows like wraiths, only to emerge in perfect synchrony on the alien's blind side. Each cub was a master of stealth and cunning, turning what should have been a massacre into a deadly chess match. The aliens began to realize their mistake. They were, yes, fast, but they were predictable, and the cubs were not. Every ambush, every trap, every feint was executed with intelligence and fearlessness. They struck in silence, vanished in a blink, and reappeared where least expected. One cub used a thermal decoy to lure a group of aliens into a frozen crevice, while another hurled a compact explosive that sent an entire squad tumbling into the ice below. Elias gritted his teeth against the pain, adrenaline overriding fatigue. The cubs weren't just surviving, they were teaching the aliens a lesson they would not forget. They don't know